A response video basically to the content of some of the crap that happened in Stickam last night and in videos by the evil ones where so they're all upset about this virtual reality thing. Why? I guess because I've suggested it, so that's their reasoning. I guess they're anti-technology atheists. Go back to nature atheists. I don't know if they're that crazy, but anyway. So in defense of virtual reality, I'll again go through this shit. We're basically bacteria with brains. We are built by a DNA molecule that only is designed for consumption and reproduction. We have lived that design, obviously. We now have 6.5 billion people on the earth. We aren't showing any discipline. Our consumption is completely out of control. We have no way to take care of the people we have on the earth with the resources available to a substantial quality of life. So we basically have to allow half the population to live in shit, to finance essentially, or to allow for the splendor of the other half. And they're not in splendor, obviously, because a lot of them are on antidepressants and are kind of dissatisfied with the imperfect reality we live in. Alright, so I say the future is virtual reality because there's huge efficiencies in satisfying our needs directly, creating a world we can live in that would be fail-safe, no vulnerability anymore to dramatic suffering, no more migraine headaches. I mean, unless you want to run deliberately a migraine headache program, you would never have to have another misery of that quality. You would just live for the game, the chase. The cheese chasing game would be optimized, basically. We would chase our tails in an environment where our paws are padded, where we don't bloody ourselves up or exploit each other or tear any. This just takes all the blood and guts out of the game of life. And it seems the rational thing to strive for, because in a sense it creates a perfect world for consciousness. Consciousness can be as creative as all potential is maximized, all positive potential is maximized, all negative potential is minimized in virtual reality. That's just the truth of the circumstance. So I think logically it has to be conceded it is the perfect environment for consciousness, because consciousness can do anything, be anything. You can be a scientist, or you can be a pig. You can be a glutton. And that's part of the reason why it really is our future, because the only thing you're going to seduce this organism that we are now, this gluttonous pig that we are currently in this environment, is by offering more gluttony. That's the way you seduce the gluttons, is to offer them more gluttony. And it doesn't get any more gluttonous than you can be in virtual reality. So if you want to just be a complete gluttonous pig, virtual reality is the place to go, because you don't create any victims. Alright, so the BCJ guy and the other ones, they wanted to frame the argument. And so, although I've never used the Matrix as an example of virtual reality, a working, practical, good example, they want to say that's what I'm suggesting. And it's just bullshit. So I'll post a link again to the original Star Trek pilot episode called The Menagerie. And that to me is a much more parallel or better example of what virtual reality could do. I'd also say the movie Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger was not a bad example, because it just showed that the worlds would be created for each individual, and those worlds would be completely perceptual. All the people in those worlds would be artificial. All the interactions would be, there would be no victims, no real suffering. It's only your conscious experience would be going on in the world. So anyway, that's the virtual reality I'm talking about. There'd be no point in creating a matrix that is to duplicate a human circumstance that exists now. The Matrix is a plot twist, okay? I mean, that's all. They have a plot contrivance in the movie because they had to make a movie. So they have the premise that somehow people couldn't stand perfection. It's a stupid premise, but that's how they made their movie possible, because they couldn't make a movie about how great virtual reality is and how happy everybody is. Then they couldn't create the conflict that they needed to resolve in the movie.
So anyway, it's just a pile of shit. And so these assholes, you know, they're just going to keep nitpicking. This is the way it works in the world. People will just try to keep finding ways to tear something down because they don't believe in the concept as a whole. So they're just going to sit there and grab at any straw or any stick and keep trying to poke and poke and poke and poke. And that's basically what went on last night with these assholes. And so BCJ said in his video, where would you get the energy to run this machine? And it's just common sense. It takes a few thousand calories at most to run a human being per day. This whole bullshit world we have to create for ourselves in reality, it's hugely expensive. All these features we need, all these accessories we need to get through the day, they all have to be built, they all have to be maintained, they all take up space, they all use fuel. This is the problem with our world. We have to transport ourselves from here to there. We have to consume time and energy to do all that kind of stuff. So yeah, virtual reality maximizes the energy consumption. It just minimizes it to its the most efficient level possible. You just feed the body in the most minimal state, physical health, and that's it. And the brain does its thing. You just give the body enough to keep the brain conscious, keep it working, and then you feed it with a program that's free, forever. And so anyway, look, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but we are moving towards it. We can see how people are becoming more and more dependent on and addicted to virtual experiences, because that really is a safe environment for our human consciousness. And it's not going to happen if we don't survive the next 20 or 50 years. It's just, it's not in the cards. And something that has to be controlled is human population. And so if we do choose to build a virtual reality, it's going to require a human investment, an investment by society. And there'd be no point in society making that investment to create a virtual reality if we left the baboons, the humans that don't want to participate, out in the world to do exactly what we've done now, which is overproduce, overconsume. So, I mean, unless there was some way to limit that population and say they can't expand beyond this territory and they can't expand beyond these numbers, yeah, there has to be rules. I mean, there's some things we just weed out of ourselves. We pass laws say you can't be a cannibal anymore because we say that's irrational and stupid. You can't throw people in volcanoes, human sacrifice anymore, because we know it's irrational and stupid. We make rules about how you treat animals. We have to make rules. And there'd be no point in, like I said, there's just no point in trying to get us out, trying to get consciousness into a safe environment where it doesn't have to suffer, where it doesn't get abused, where it's not vulnerable anymore, if you're going to leave part of it in a vulnerable atmosphere, because it's going to do the bacteria with brains thing. It's not going to control itself. It's not going to restrain itself. Unless there's some physical, practical way that you can guarantee that it's not going to overrun itself, there's just no practical way those two worlds can exist with each other. We have to make a choice. We're either going to be civilized or we're not going to be civilized. But that's going to be the choice. And someday democracies and people are going to have to make that. They're going to have to make that decision. In the next few years, we're going to be making a decision about who's going to win the class war. I mean, are the working people going to win the war, or are the rich people going to win the war? Because the two of them can't coexist anymore. There's too much exploitation in our societies. We're either going to have to make it less exploitive, or we're going to have to make it easier to exploit people. But it's going to be one way or the other. This isn't going to work anymore, and especially when bills have to be paid and systems have to change because they're going to start crashing.
So anyway, I'm not suggesting any Holocaust. I'm not suggesting genocide. I mean, this rhetoric is just so disgusting. I don't suggest harming anything on this planet, okay? But I do suggest there are behaviors that need to be grandfathered out of our existence. So I mean, it's like if you were completely and totally dependent on doing some behavior, I don't see any problem with society saying, okay, do that behavior for the rest of your life, but don't breed it into another generation. So if we decide that eating meat isn't worth doing anymore, we could say that, yeah, your existing meat eaters, you can still eat meat, but your children won't. That's how you change the world. You make a rule and you impose it in the most harmless way possible. But these assholes just won't let things go. They just have to keep throwing arguments in, and they have to keep perverting arguments. They have to keep, it's a game, okay? They don't care about the truth. They don't care about a rational argument. Can't see past their own presumptions. We say this works, okay, because we compare it to nothing. We compare it to something worse. The only way our life now looks good is because we compare it to something like the Holocaust and say, oh, that's a hell of a lot better than the Holocaust. But we don't compare it to something better. We don't compare it to perfection. And it's only rational for us to seek perfection. If you're not a friggin' asshole, have reverence for deities, There's no rational reason not for a thinking intelligence to say perfection is a reasonable goal. Even if you can't achieve it, there's no point in not going in that direction. You would try to make things as perfect as possible. And you try to do that as efficiently as possible. And that's all I'm fucking suggesting. And so if somebody wants to turn that into draconian philosophy, that's their choice, but they're only manipulating the factual conversation. They're only distorting it for their purposes. I say quite emphatically that in the long term, if you're talking about human beings being here for 10,000 years or 100,000 years, the only practical place for them to live is in a safe, virtual environment. If you're going to try to make the real world suit this human need, suit this hunger, this desire, these drives that are built into this organism, there's no way you're going to do it unless you take all the fun out of life, unless you strip us of our individuality, unless you strip us of our extravagance, our excesses, our gluttony. And who's going to do that? Well, by what force are you going to do that to the human psyche? Okay, so if you want to keep human individuality, if you want to keep our uniqueness, if you want to keep our extravagance, if you want to keep all these things that you assholes value so much, the only way you're going to be able to keep those in the future is in some world where it's practical to have them.